peace. It is loud now, louder than the explosions of bombs. We tremble at the sound. We are thrilled by its presence. It is what we have hungered for. Not just the absence of war, but true peace, a harmony of spirit, a comfort of courtesies, security for our beloveds and their beloveds. On this platform of peace, we can create a language to translate ourselves and to each other. We, angels and mortals, believers and non-believers, look heavenward and speak the word loud. Peace. We look at our world and speak the word loud. Peace. We look at each other and then into ourselves, and we say without shyness or apology or hesitation, peace, my brother. Peace, my sister. Peace, my soul. So the monument that we are dedicating today honors the memory and place in the fabric of this community of members of this community who were enslaved. On the monument, as you can see here, we have certain symbols that we've chosen to include that. And I just want to give some background on that for those who are not familiar with these. These are cherished by many people in the African and Black diaspora. They're meaningful, they're important symbols that originated among the Akan people of West Africa. And we know that genetic studies reveal that the ancestors of a majority of those transported to North America came from West Africa. They have specific meanings and wisdom and values that are included in them. The first is Sankofa, which comes from a proverb that means it's never wrong to return for that which you have forgotten. We have a bird which is walking one direction, but it's turned its head, and in some interpretations it's picking up an egg, in others it's a jewel. But it's saying that we should go back for those things, which are important. The four symbols at the bottom, the first means freedom, it's a broken shackle. The second is courage with love, and is represented as a heart. The next is endurance and growth, which is represented as a fern. And humility and strength, which are represented as the horns of two rams. And the words that are the poem that go down the side are an expression in English of those four symbols that we have included. First, we recognize four who were known to and cherished by their families and community, but whose names do not appear in our records. We as a community acknowledge and honor that they were and are a part of this place. A space has been reserved on the memorial for each of the names that the records have not revealed. These precious souls lived in Uxbridge in 1749, 1754, 1754, and 1779. We also commemorate the lives of Fortune, a young boy who was killed in a house fire on April 4th, 1740. Felix is the name of a man who was recorded as property in a court record to collect a debt. Robin, who died in 1812, appears in a list of property in a will and also in the inventory of an estate. He is buried very near the place of the new memorial. A family of five includes Jenny, who married Felix in 1744 and became the parents of at least three daughters, Venus, Rose, and Phillis. Felix's death record appears in Uxbridge in May 1800. Will and Sabina were enslaved in the household of Uxbridge's first minister. They were sold twice and then abandoned when they were old and infirm by a slaveholder who went bankrupt and ran away. A petition to the colonial authorities from Uxbridge described that they had been in a suffering condition for a long time and asked them to pass legislation to provide them relief. The legislation was written, but in the end, the petition died in committee and no relief was provided. Will appears again in Uxbridge records in 1777, a year after the passing of their original slaveholder. Town meeting referred the care of Will to the selectmen. Sabina had likely died by then. The records show payments to four different Uxbridge households for keeping the Negro man Will, probably for about a year at a time. A payment was made in 1781 for expenses in Will's final year of life and to prepare a grave for his burial. Koof and Diane and Dinah were married in 1760. Dinah and their son Brister were baptized at the First Congregational Church in 1775. Cato Fortunatus was sent by his slaveholder to fight in the Revolutionary War. Records show that he took the place of another family member of the slaveholder. His pay as a soldier was sent to his slaveholder, and this was not an uncommon practice during the war. Cato Fortunatus later enlisted for 3 additional years, with his service credited to Upton. Another record shows an unnamed person serving in the Revolutionary War for 4 months in 1779 for the same family, and assigns credit for that service to the slaveholder. Records show another enslaved person named Fortune Black was also enlisted to fill a quota for Uxbridge. Cato Willard was about 13 years old when the Massachusetts courts banned slaveholding. He lived in a household of Dr. Levi Willard of Mendon, and likely worked for Levi's cousin, Dr. Samuel Willard of Uxbridge. Cato married Lydia Brayton in 1775. They had 7 children, 5 in Mendon and 2 in Uxbridge. He died in 1834 and is buried in Prospect Hill Cemetery with his wife and his children who were free. We do know of others in Uxbridge whose lives were greatly challenged. Mrs. Nancy Adams, who I've spoken on many times, escaped enslavement 3 times. She was born in Maryland. Her family was split. She and 3 children were sold south to the cotton fields of Louisiana. We know that she came north when she had been hired out to a man and hid in a nice house for 3 days in Norwich, Connecticut, before the Underground Railroad brought her to Uxbridge, where she lived to a great age and is buried in our Uxbridge Almshouse Cemetery. We acknowledge and memorialize all others who may have once lived here in our community, as well as these. The monument we are dedicating today honors and recalls these lives. We acknowledge that the contributions made to the development of Uxbridge by the named, recognized but unnamed, and the unknown enslaved individuals in our town. In acknowledging their contributions, we also express our deep regret about their condition of servitude. We have 2 more speakers this afternoon. Select Board Member John Wise will follow me, and then our State Rep, Joe McKenna, has also joined us, and then I'll speak for a minute to close this.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to speak on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, or Select Board here in Uxbridge. As we gather here to dedicate this monument in memory of the oppressed souls who lived here. Today we come together to honor these individuals and to acknowledge a chapter of history that is often overlooked. These names and households are part of our community story. Those who endured oppression and those who resisted it with courage. The history of Uxbridge is both complex and shared, reminding us of the importance of empathy, understanding, and moral courage in our lives. This marker stands as a commitment to remember the past honestly and to educate ourselves and future generations and to uphold the dignity of every human being. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe McKenna. I'm fortunate to be one of the 2 members of the House of Representatives that is privileged to serve the town of Uxbridge. And I'm honored to have been invited to come and commemorate the dedication of this plaque and memorial. And it is certainly important that we take time to reflect on our history as a community and as a people. And we don't ignore it, we don't hide from it, but we acknowledge it and we recognize it, and that's what we're doing with this plaque and this memorial, and that's a good thing. And when the Historic Society reached out to ask that I come today, they asked that I present a little bit of the history of slavery in the United States and in Massachusetts. And while certainly we all know and understand it, they did provide a timeline and a more direct history of slavery, and it's good to have that time to re-educate ourselves on the realities of slavery and the timeline that took place. Because I think, unfortunately, what happens We learn about it in elementary school, and then it becomes a known, but the details aren't necessarily known to the level that perhaps they should be. So when I was reading through this summary that was given to me by the Historic Society, I found myself moved by the history, and it's important to take the time to re-educate ourselves on what really took place. And though we all understand and know the history, to have it presented again to refresh that memory is important. And so I thank the members of the Historic Society for bringing that to me, and I'd like to share some of that with you now. Slavery was present in Massachusetts beginning as early as 1624, described as human chattel, and it was part of the commercial trade. We see recorded by many, John Jocelyn and Samuel Maverick, among other slaveholders, they even intended to breed African individuals as property, and they wanted those children to be property for themselves. Enslaved people were treated as property, including them in wills, including the will in 1637 of Pilgrim Samuel Fuller and the 1638 will of Governor John Winthrop. Slavery was recognized and made legal by the legislature in 1641, with that institution continuing for more than 150 years as a legally recognized business in Massachusetts. Many scholars have studied the topic and note that enslaved individuals in Massachusetts were often called servants. We like to make things sound a little better than they are, and servants may have been a better word than slavery. But the reality is that the different ranks of slavery, different ranks of servants existed, but at the lowest ranks were African individuals and criminals, and they were held under involuntary servitude and did not enjoy the legal rights of some indentured servants. Slave-owning households in Massachusetts generally had one or two individuals who would live and work alongside their owners, although those were exceptions, not general practice. Nonetheless, enslavement was for life, and the law imposed restrictions on who slaves or released freedmen could marry, and under what circumstances they could travel, and where they may gather socially. Quantifying the number of enslaved people in Massachusetts was always a challenge. The legislature did order a count in 1754, at which point Massachusetts was in the middle of the French and Indian War, and cash was very, very tight. The decision was made to add adult slaves to the category of property that the state could then tax as a source of revenue to help fund the war. At that point, males over 16 years old would be valued at 20 pounds sterling and females at 15 pounds, which is a rough equivalency to about $3,000, $3,200 today. An ox or a horse at the time was valued at 4 pounds sterling, with cows at 2 pounds. So a human adult male was about 4 or 5 times the value of a horse or an ox. For that census, only 119 towns responded and reported a number of 2,700 slaves, although that count omitted anyone under the age of 16. By 1764, there were 2,500 males of color and 1,857 females living in Massachusetts without differentiating between enslaved or freed slaves, though some records were missing or incomplete. And it was to the point some handwriting from some reporting was illegible, and I think the territory known as Maine, which was part of Massachusetts at the time, did not report to that count. 2 years later, sentiment in Massachusetts legislature began to turn against the institution of slavery. So that was around 1766, give or take. There was a ban placed on the import of enslaved individuals. And over the next 7 years, the demographics and release of slavery reduced the number of slaves by about a third, with the 1771 tax inventory reflecting a total of 1,200 individuals subject to lifetime indentures in Massachusetts. With the onset of the Revolutionary War, we saw many men of color, both freedmen and slaves, included in the ranks of both Patriot and Continental armies. A count in 1776 reported some 4,800 individuals, both freed and enslaved, in Massachusetts, with just under half of those serving in military service as reported by the Daughters of the American Revolution. And as the war went on, towns and the legislature wrestled to create a governing framework for Massachusetts and to write a state constitution. After considerable debate, the first Massachusetts Constitution was agreed upon and enacted in 1780. That document enshrined the principles of freedom and equality that underpinned the purpose of the Revolution, while implicitly raising questions about the validity of having a proportion of the population in slavery. Both freedmen and slaves, who had a long-standing right to seek redress of grievance in the court system, began challenging the contradiction of slavery in a free society. An initial case filed in 1781 by Elizabeth Freeman, also known as Mum Bet, was quickly followed by a suit filed by Quoke Walker. The latter case wended its way through the court system until it reached the Supreme Judicial Court in 1783, with the High Court ruling in July of that year that slavery is incompatible with the constitutional guarantee that all men are free and equal. However, the court did not issue a specific order ending slavery, and no legislation was passed to that effect. As a result, the effective emancipation of enslaved individuals occurred slowly. However, by the first federal census in 1790, it was reported there were no enslaved people in Massachusetts. More recently, Governor Charlie Baker signed legislation on November 1st of 2022 that declared July 8th as Massachusetts Emancipation Day, also known as Quock Walker Day. The day has been celebrated annually since, and many cities and city councils and town select boards have issued formal decrees recognizing July 8th as Quock Walker Day as well. Other towns are joining Uxbridge to erect memorials to their formerly enslaved people, and that's what we're here to do today. So I thank the Historic Society for inviting me to participate in this, and again, for reminding me of the importance of remembering and knowing our history, the good and the bad. So thank you very much.
So I'd like to thank everyone for coming and sharing this dedication and this day with us. We're very pleased that you have joined us for this moment. We'd like to thank the board and staff of Prospect Hill Cemetery who were very helpful in this process, helped us get permissions and ability to put this marker there. We appreciate the generous support of the Uxbridge Historical Commission and its members who sponsored this marker. And those who funded it, which include the Mass Cultural Council, the state agency, the Uxbridge Cultural Council, a local agency, the Uxbridge Historical Society, whose president is with us today, and other private donors. We thank the town hall staff and our community television partners for their help in holding this event. We invite all of our guests to visit this historical marker, which stands at the entrance of Prospect Hill Cemetery near the entrance on Mendon Street, which is Route 16. So thank you everyone for coming and joining with us in this moment. We appreciate the care and process that has produced this memorial, this commemoration for our community. Since this went to the forge, we have discovered a few more names, so there may well be additional things that we'll be doing down the road, which is a wonderful thing. So, and we expected that. We expected that this would spark more research, more looks at the records, and that more things can and will be found. So thank you for your attendance. We wish you all a good day.
One last thing I'd like to mention is, Sue, we were up here, thanking everyone and did so much work. How about a round of applause for Susan?
You've dedicated a lot of your life to the history and with slavery and just the knowledge of
Everything that's happened in Uxbridge, so we thank you for bringing it to the forefront for us. Thank you.
Yeah.